We've now provided end-to-end tests for user registration, selection of an item on the home page, and adding an item to the cart. The next thing we want to test is that the cart page accurately reflects the shopping cart state. So let's go to the terminal and create a new page object, this time for the cart page. So we'll type touch, test, E2E, page objects, cart. We'll open this file now and begin by exporting a module. We're going to give this one a URL property so we can navigate to it. And we'll assign a template literal to this one, in which we'll put the variable process.env view dev server URL, followed by cart. So that'll get us to the cart page. Let's now examine the cart page in the browser and figure out how we're going to test it. So firstly, when we navigate to this page, we're going to need to tell Nightwatch to wait for the presence of the page content. So we'll need a selector for that. Now, if you inspect the DOM, you can see that the main wrapper element has this class cart, which we can use for this purpose. So in our cart page object, let's create an elements property and assign to that an object. And we're going to add an element cart, and we'll give this one selector of .cart, which is that cart class. Next, we're going to need to select the first item in the cart and ensure it's the one that we added. Inspecting the cart item list in the DOM, we can see that the list has this class on it, cart items. So in the page object, let's add another element, and this one will be first cart item. We'll assign it an object and we'll give it a selector, which is going to be cart hyphen items and then first child. So let's say we search the DOM and we find a cart item in the cart item list. How can we be sure it's the same cart item that we actually added to the cart? Unlike the items on the home page, the cart items have no URL attribute that we can extract. We could test the title text, but that could produce false positives if multiple items have the same name. So here we're looking at the cart view, and we can see where the cart items are declared here. So what we're going to have to do is add the item's ID to an attribute on the cart item element, and that's going to render in the markup. We can then use a Nightwatch command to extract that ID. So what we're going to do is add a custom attribute, and it's going to be data-id, and we're going to bind to this the item's ID, so we can just go item.id like that. Now, since this attribute, data-id, is not registered as a prop on the cart item component, it's just going to get rendered as it is in the DOM. So after making that change and the code rebuilds, if we now inspect the cart items on the shopping cart page, notice how this data ID attribute is now appearing in the DOM, and that's going to provide the ID that Nightwatch is going to need to identify the correct cart item. So back in our spec file, let's create a new test. We're going to call this one check item in cart. We'll assign a fat arrow function with browser as the argument. And we're going to begin by using the browser object. And we're going to call register and pass in the user object. And then we're going to call select item. Next, we're going to use the item page object. So let's create a const item and go browser.page item like that at the top of the function. And what that's going to allow us to do is to now go item, and we'll use the click method. I'm going to click on the add to cart button like that. Now we're going to need to navigate to the cart page. So to do that, we'll need the cart page object that we've just created. So again, we'll create a new variable cart, and we'll call the cart method to get that page object. Now what we can do is come down here and go cart.navigate. And before we attempt to check the first cart item, let's wait for the page to have rendered by going, wait for element present, and we can use the alias cart like that. Let's now assert the first cart item is the item we selected and added to the cart. We can do this by getting the cart item's data ID attribute and comparing it to the selected item's ID. So on the cart page object, let's go ahead and go assert attribute equals. And the first argument will be first cart item, so that's the item we want to get the attribute for. The second argument is the attribute that we want to get, which is going to be data-id. And we're also going to need to pass a third argument, and that's going to be the value that we're asserting. Now, to get that value, we can use the callback from our select item method up here. Because remember, this returns the URL for the item, and we can extract the item's ID from that URL. So what we're going to do is go to the top of the file and initialize a variable item ID, and then we're going to do a fat arrow function in select item here, and we're going to give it an argument val like that, and then we will initialize a value for item ID, and that's going to be the last segment of the URL that gets returned. So let's use this expression. We're going to go val.split, and we're going to split by the slash that's in the URL, and we're going to use the slice method and pass -1, and that's going to give us the last segment of the URL, and then we're going to go pop to get that value. Now what we can do is pass item ID as the third argument to attribute equals. And don't forget, we need to call browser.end to complete the test. Before we run the test though, there is one more issue that we have to deal with, and recall that if we declare a variable and don't initialize it, that the value that we're going to get in our assertions is the compile time value, not the runtime value. So to fix this, we're going to use the browser object here. Oops, and we're going to use the perform method, pass a callback into that, and then we will go cart.assert attribute equals, etc., and that should give us the item ID at runtime. So I've now gone ahead and run the test suite again, and the check item in cart test is passing with 6 new assertions.